Well, I'm excited. Welcome to PatsCast. The Patriots secure a 48-18 victory in their preseason opener against the Washington Commanders. And look, this is a preseason game. I don't want to get too excited, but I don't think anyone was really expecting this polished of a performance, at least in the first half, from this Patriots squad today. And the amazing thing is, in a lot of ways, they didn't even really play that well. Drake Maye kind of struggled. The receivers struggled to get open in the first half, and yet the Patriots just dominated that game from the get-go, and it really started off with the kickoff return from rookie out of Ohio State, second-round pick TreVeyon Henderson. Explosive speed I don't think we've ever seen in New England before, something that really has been missing from this organization for a very long time, at the very least. Him coming right off with an easy, just effortless touchdown on a kickoff return. We're all excited to see the offense take the field. Patriots get a 7-0 lead right out of the gate from TreVeyon Henderson. He did lots of great things today, and I'll get to the whole running back situation in just a minute, but the vibes are back at Gillette. They really are. It feels like the Belichick Brady era, but even those games weren't packed in the preseason once the Patriots really became established because, you want to go for the regular season. People want to see this new Mike Vrabel regime, Drake Maye coming into his second year, all the different acquisitions that the Patriots made this offseason. And again, the Patriots, they played a lot of their starters with exception to the workload management players, the Carlton Davises, the Christian Barmores, Christian Gonzalez, obviously out with an injury right now. Morgan Moses didn't play. But for the most part, Drake Maye played a couple of series out there. They had all of the receivers except for Stephon Diggs. That makes sense not to play him week one of the preseason. But we got to see just who they are. And are they the most talented team in the league? Of course not. But they are a buttoned-up, polished team that looks like they've been playing together for a long time and have built a ton of chemistry. And we talked about Patriots are having kind of a soft training camp. They're doing a lot of walkthroughs, not super intense physical padded practices outside of maybe a couple in the joint practice a couple of days ago. Well, whatever they're doing, it's working. Mike Vrabel knows what he's doing. These walkthroughs make a lot of sense. We know the Patriots are learning a very complex offense. They're learning a new defense. And, the defense shut down the Washington Commanders for 3 points in the first half. Now, there were a lot of drops. They didn't have Jaden Daniels out there. Obviously, Terry McLaurin still holding out. They were not with their A-level players. It was their B, C squad, and the Patriots were basically their A-, B+ squad. But still, putting on 48 points, putting up 27 points alone in the first half, when your quarterback's really not playing that well, Josh Dobbs didn't look all that great. Ben Wooldridge, a little rusty when he got out there, but kind of got it going, but, nothing too spectacular. Receivers struggled to get open. So what did the Patriots do? They just ran the ball down the throats of the Commanders, and the pass protection was decent. It struggled a little bit early, but better than I was expecting, and the run blocking was exceptional and opened up so many holes for TreVeyon Henderson, Antonio Gibson, Ramondre Stevenson, and even Land Larison, who got quite a few touches there in the second half. So, really impressive performance by the Patriots. Let's break it down just a little bit. Drake Maye, obviously he showed his flashes. He had a scramble touchdown on his second drive of the game, but early on, he fumbled while rolling to his left. There was a bit of a miscommunication. This was really the only mistake I saw from Will Campbell and Jared Wilson, who looks very good out there, except for that one play. And it really had nothing to do with physical talent. They just miscommunicated. Drake Maye tried to get rid of the football, throw it away before being sacked, and ended up fumbling the ball. The ball slipped out of his hand while he was winding up to throw it. Costly turnover there. You don't want to see that type of stuff, especially early on in a game. But then when Drake Maye came in the second series, they were cautious, they were conservative. And look, we've seen this before with the Josh McDaniels offense. You don't see a lot in the preseason. Tom Brady didn't exactly have flashy preseason games with the Patriots. it took them a while to build up to week 1, and, they're going to be running the most basic versions of their offense in these types of games. So it's hard to say, the offense, very complex, very technical. Drake Maye's picking it up while he's changing protections at the line. No, it wasn't so much that. We'll have a better assessment of that once the season comes around, but the run blocking, the fact that the Patriots had 0 penalties until the last couple of minutes of the first half, which means pretty much all the starters were out of the game by then. Running the football, like I said, touchdowns to both TreVeyon Henderson on a kickoff return. Land Larison had a touchdown. Terrell Jennings had a touchdown. Stevenson ran the ball for 36 yards. Larison 35. Gibson for 26. Henderson, who was the most impressive, actually only ran it for 18 on just 1 carry. But, his ability to block, his ability to pass catch, he's a tremendous player. And what really impressed me most watching this game was just how deep the Patriots are. We talked about the receiving core a lot, and I'll get into that in just a second with who makes the team, who doesn't. I mean, this is a situation where you might want to have 7 wide receivers on the roster. But the defense shut down, especially in the first half, really looked like the more physical team out there, looked more prepared, looked ready to go. Everyone lining up in the right position. Few mistakes on offense. Like I said, few penalties. This was a very encouraging performance. And I'll be excited to see how they build on it next week when they go to Minnesota. They have a joint practice. And of course, they're probably going to get a lot more Minnesota starters heading into that game. People play their starters a little bit more as the preseason progresses. But, Drake Maye, again, he kind of struggled early with that fumble, bounced back with a safe scramble and slide. Again, receivers were really struggling to get open in that first half, but he scrambled a couple of times, but they were cautious scrambles. They were nothing where you're like, oh gosh, he's putting his body on the line. Slid, scramble for a touchdown, which you can really attribute to the excellent blocking of Will Campbell and Jared Wilson that opened up a gap. And then TreVeyon Henderson came out there and sucked in 2 defenders, created a wide open lane for Drake Maye to run to the end zone. And this is the kind of thing that you're going to see with Josh McDaniels' offense, even the vanilla version that we saw today. It's all about, it's less timing and rhythm like you see with the West Coast offense, and more about spacing and putting your players in situations so there's at least something to capitalize on. And, if the defense is not putting a QB spy out there, which they probably won't in a preseason game, well, you take the profit, and that's what Drake Maye did. And, aside from that fumble, I'm not too worried about Drake Maye. He has some mechanical issues, which I talked about in the last podcast that I don't love. But overall, taking command of this offense, and I think the joint practices a couple of days ago, there was a lot more changing protections, calling alerts at the line, changing the play, doing those types of things, and that's what I'm most excited about, to see what that actually looks like once the regular season comes around. Josh Dobbs had a bit of a mixed bag. There were some open receivers out there. He had Kyle Williams on a low slant for an easy touchdown in the low red zone, just flat out missed him, threw it over his head essentially. Had a few throws like that. There's one to Javon Baker that was just kind of a fade pass and went, 2 feet over Baker's hand. Dobbs looks a little bit erratic out there. Now, he did have a scrambling touchdown. We saw his flashy highlights a couple of years ago in Minnesota when Kirk Cousins went down. He can step in, but I am more comfortable with Josh Dobbs as a spot starter than I am if Drake Maye tears his ACL and is out for the rest of the season. Because Ben Wooldridge, he settled down a little bit. He's the 3rd-string quarterback that came in, undrafted free agent. He throws some Mac Jones butterflies out there a little bit. His 2nd and 3rd series had a lot more zip on the ball. Really loves throwing the ball to Efton Chisholm. So does Josh Dobbs. I'm going to be talking about Efton Chisholm a lot. But it's Drake Maye, and then there's a pretty massive drop-off there. And I don't want to start talking about Joe Milton, who looks like he's doing a great job down in Dallas. But, you I wish you got more for him if you're going to trade a quarterback that good, because I'm sorry, Dobbs and Wooldridge, you better hope Drake Maye is able to play 17 games. Now, the offensive line, we had Will Campbell out there at left tackle, Jared Wilson at left guard, Bradbury at center, Michael Wenu played very briefly, started at right guard, and then Marcus Bryant got the nod at right tackle before DeMontre Jacobs filled in. Bryant looked a lot better, at least from the eye test, than Jacobs did, but O-line was a lot better than I was expecting. Doug Marrone's doing a hell of a job there. The Josh McDaniels influence certainly helps. Like I said, Will Campbell, Jared Wilson, a little bit of a miscommunication on the Drake Maye fumble that should have been a sack or a throwaway. But after that, they looked great. There was one play, hopefully it's somewhere out there, Will Campbell blocked a player 10 yards downfield. I think it was a defensive back. He finished the play. That's something that Mike Vrabel stresses. And he just took a defensive back player down, went from one level to the next, exactly what you want to see from a rookie. Had a huge run block on an explosive play from TreVeyon Henderson at one point. That was his one big 18-yard carry of the game. Paved the way for Maye's scramble touchdown, pushed the player back when Maye stepped up on the pocket and decided to run with it. Jared Wilson also had a key block on that Maye touchdown. Cole Strange got some reps at right guard, a lot more than left guard. He eventually, I think, moved to left for a little bit. Nothing glaring out there for Cole Strange. I hope there's a spot for him on the roster. Garrett Bradbury, I've harped on quite a bit on this podcast, but there was nothing out there that really seemed concerning. And if Jared Wilson and Will Campbell really have that solid chemistry, and they are the solid NFL starter rookies that you want them to be, then okay. Head Bradbury at center, shore up the left side of the line with two hopefully future franchise players. You got Michael Wenu at right guard. Moses will eventually be at right tackle. Marcus Bryant, a little bit shaky out there, but not terrible. Better than what we've seen from DeMontre Jacobs in the past, who struggled a little bit when he came in. O-line looks so much better. It looks so much better. And like I said, the receivers weren't getting open, but Drake Maye seemed to have plenty of time to throw the football. And the run blocking was even better than the pass blocking. So, really good to see. Really just one sack allowed was the one from Drake Maye. And that was it. That was it. So, great performance there by the offensive line. The run blocking, they had 153 yards rushing total. And then the receivers were a little bit disappointing, I'll say. So you had out there, obviously Stephon Diggs was not out there, so you had Kayshon Boutte, Pop Douglas, and Mac Hollins out there as the starting three. None of those guys really did anything out there. I don't think Douglas was even targeted. Boutte wasn't even targeted. Mac Hollins was targeted once. That's about it for the starters. Again, they just weren't getting open early, which is a little concerning. It's not like Washington has the greatest DBs. They have Lattimore. He struggled a little bit last year, but didn't matter because they're able to run the football. This is what we saw with Mike Vrabel in Tennessee. Very run heavy. A lot of that had to do with the fact Ryan Tannehill was their quarterback, but it worked with Derrick Henry, and now they got a three-headed monster out there. They're always going to have someone fresh. And if the run blocking looks this good this early on, I know it's a preseason game. There's a lot of growth that's going to need to happen, but this is an excellent and encouraging start. But there were some players that did stand out. Efton Chisholm led the team in targets by a ton. Kyle Williams had 4 targets. Kyle Williams was second with 4 targets. Efton Chisholm had 8 targets, 6 catches, 50 yards. I think he was really only in there with Josh Dobbs and Ben Wooldridge. Maybe he was in there briefly with Drake Maye. I thought I saw him, but I might have been mixing him up with somebody else. But Efton Chisholm did an excellent job. Multiple short to intermediate catches, getting open despite Josh Dobbs missing him a couple of times. He made a really tough catch on a tip pass where he had to catch the ball and immediately break a tackle and then ran into the end zone for a touchdown. Also caught a big slip screen from Wooldridge, which set up a Jennings touchdown on the next play. You got to put Efton Chisholm on this roster. Everyone's saying it's Polk, Baker, Kendrick Bourne, and Efton Chisholm competing for the last wide receiver spot. He looks great as a punt returner, and he's the type of player who you want to keep just to see how he develops, how he grows. Frankly, I think he's the kind of player where if Demario Douglas goes down, you can insert him in there and he will contribute right away. I really feel that way about Efton Chisholm. I know he's not the fastest, and he's certainly small, but he looks a lot bigger out there. He's quick. Maybe the best hands on the team. Maybe Stephon Diggs has better hands, but you got to keep this guy. You're not going to be able to keep him on the practice squad. Somebody will take him away. There's enough buzz. His name's around the league at this point. I think you got to keep Efton Chisholm on the roster. But it gets a little bit more difficult because Javon Baker, he didn't do a ton. He was targeted twice, didn't have any catches or anything. Did have a drop that it was a bit of a hard read to catch the ball, but it's still the type of catch he should have. That said, he made 2 excellent tackles on special teams. So we're talking about Efton Chisholm because he can contribute on special teams and he has a high ceiling. Well, Javon Baker actually had some real highlight plays on special teams today. Didn't do much on offense, but it's the same argument for Baker as Chisholm, another guy with a high ceiling and, some maturity issues that you hope will develop a little bit over time. But I don't know. Look, I don't know if there's a spot for Kendrick Bourne. I don't think there's going to be a spot for Jalen Polk at this point. He was pretty quiet today. He wasn't even targeted once. I think they handed the ball off to him once. He gained about a yard. So I think Polk's the easy cut there. I think Bourne, you might have to cut. Maybe you can trade him for somebody. I'd love to keep Baker and Chisholm both on this roster. That means you're carrying a ton of receivers, right? You're carrying, 6, 7 receivers? Maybe some of them are there just as special teams guys, Baker and Chisholm early on. But look, if they're contributing this much on special teams, and Efton Chisholm just looks this good with the 2s, you got to give Chisholm a shot with the 1s before the preseason's over, just to see what you have there. And maybe do the same with Baker. But I love it if both of those guys stayed. And Polk is easily on the chopping block at this point, in my opinion. And as much as we love Kendrick Bourne, the injury, didn't play at all this week. Who knows if he'll even be back out there next week. Hard to trade him then. I think Kendrick Bourne, there's plenty of wide receiver needy teams. Kendrick Bourne might be a guy that you could trade, but the injury doesn't help that either. Some other disappointments at receiver. Kyle Williams was very quiet today. He was targeted 4 times with 0 catches. He did have that low slant, which Josh Dobbs should have hit him on for an easy touchdown that he did not. But Williams had a pretty bad drop pass later. Kind of struggling to gain traction right now at this point. Really flashed a lot the first couple of days of camp, and then we really haven't heard much from Kyle Williams since. He's very fast. I saw him run a vertical route today, and you say, all right, the speed's there. We thought the hands were there. Could it be another disappointment? Well, luckily you got lots of depth at receiver. He's going to be on the roster, right? You're not going to draft a receiver that early and not have him on the roster. This isn't a Polk situation where he was a colossal failure last year. You still have to see what you're going to get from Kyle Williams, but yeah, I'd love to see a little bit more from him, and it's not like he's not being targeted out there, and he played quite a bit today, and we're not seeing a lot. So, quiet day for the top receivers, but overall, Efton Chisholm really impressed at the position. John Giles, Jeremiah Webb, there's not going to be a spot for them on the roster, but Giles had 48 yards, Webb had 41 yards, both had two targets and 2 catches. So good performance there. Got to see a little bit more from the starters, but it's really hard to tell again because they're not taking advantage of mismatches. They're not trying to create unique space like they would in a regular season in this Josh McDaniels offense. So, hard to be discouraged by it, but not a great performance from the receivers. But like I said, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. You had a quick 7-0 lead. You had the fumble in the second drive. Third drive, you marched down the field, mostly on the ground. Scramble touchdown from Drake Maye. and they really relied on the running backs. TreVeyon Henderson, again, electric with the opening kickoff return. Excellent blocker out there. I think he dropped a pass at one point, but otherwise he's super dynamic, and I think he's the best on the roster right now. And look, if you're going to draft a running back in the first couple of rounds, in today's NFL, running backs have a shelf life of about 2.5 to 5 years, unless they're very good, and then it's like 10 years. You got to get him out there. You got to get him out there early, right away. It's an explosive element that this offense hasn't had, that Josh McDaniels hasn't had in a long time. Then you had Antonio Gibson, who also had an excellent game. 65-yard kickoff return himself. Several good runs for Gibson. He had 26 yards on the ground. Longest run was 17. Lan Larison contributing out there. 7 carries for 35 yards. He had a 16-yard carry at one point. And Ramondre Stevenson also had 7 carries for 36 yards, which actually led the team. Did have a 13-yard carry. But I have to say, watching Stevenson out there and contrasting it with Antonio Gibson and certainly TreVeyon Henderson, is he the third best running back on the roster? Like, he might be. Antonio Gibson had a better season than Stevenson did last year. We still consider Ramondre the primary back, but you got this explosive player that you drafted in the second round that we assumed would just kind of be a third down back as a rookie, but you don't want to waste it, right? You don't want to waste it. He should have been a first-round pick. People said he was a first-round talent. Gibson looks great out there. Stevenson, the stats say he did okay today, but he doesn't have the explosiveness those other two running backs have. And Mondre still has a great name around the league, which means I don't see why you don't put him on the trade block at this point. And Lan Larison impressed today. A third back out there. Antonio Gibson and TreVeyon Henderson can play the third down role very well. They're both solid pass-catching backs. The third guy on the depth chart's not going to play that much anyway. So if you're really not sure about Mondre, if you think Henderson should start and you think Gibson might be better, well, there's got to be a team out there that would trade you. Maybe you get a 6th-round pick or nothing great back, but I'm fine. If they just want to run it with Henderson and Gibson and then sprinkle Larison in there, who really looks encouraging, I don't think it's a terrible idea. Now, do I think that's going to happen? Probably not. The Josh McDaniels offense always has the bruiser running back, LeGarrette Blount type player out there. He prefers to have that, but at the same time, he also likes versatility at the position. He likes being able to rotate backs in and out. And when you have that one power back, that really sucks up a lot of usage. And I'd love to see them just start Henderson or start Gibson or even Larison, depending on the matchup, and really play around with it, because this is the biggest strength on the team is the running backs, and a sneaky strength might actually be the run blocking. So, I don't know. But look, this worked well for Vrabel in Tennessee with Derrick Henry. I'm not saying any of these guys are Derrick Henry, but if the blocking looks this good and you have a quarterback that presumably is going to be significantly better than Ryan Tannehill, like, the sky's the limit for this offense. And you don't even have Stephon Diggs out there at this point. It'd be interesting to see if he gets any time this preseason. But, once they start scheming things up a little bit for some real games and have a little bit more of a balanced attack, this offense, I'm very excited about it. And I'm mostly excited because the O-line looks better than I thought. And the running backs, who I thought were going to be good, just are electric at this point. So, 48-18. This was really shocking. Defense, again, shut down the Commanders in the first half. And I think what impresses me most about the defense is usually when you get to the second half of these preseason games, especially week 1, before there's been any cutdowns or anything like that, you're usually going like, who the hell are these guys out there? I think I knew 9 of the 11 players on the field late in the fourth quarter on defense. These are guys, Del Pettis, guys that, got a significant chunk of playing time last year, Marcus Epps, that are, struggling to make the team at this point. There's just so much depth at every position on this team. Maybe not right now at cornerback with Christian Gonzalez out and Carlton Davis being managed because he has a very rich injury history. But seeing some of those names out there in the second half, you're like, okay, they're not even putting Milton Williams out there right now. They're not even putting Christian Barmore out there. They're getting to the quarterback. They're getting pressure. And, you have guys like DJ James coming up with an interception who really has an excellent shot of making this roster. Jalen Hawkins having a good camp, very impactful. Alex Austin having a tremendous camp, looked excellent today. Miles Battle had one kind of blew one play at one point, but other than that, big physical DB that you can put out there. They got a ton of depth at the safety roles, and they'll have depth at the cornerback positions once you have Gonzalez and Davis back out there. Some struggles out there. Craig Woodson, who's having a pretty good camp. I wasn't too impressed with him today. Joshua Farmer was hit or miss. Monty Rice got burned. I don't think he's going to make the team. Kyle Duggar, who I've talked about, potential trade block guy, might lose his job to Craig Woodson, although Woodson didn't look too great today. Duggar kind of looks slow and tired out there. He really does. And I'm wondering, he's been battling injury for 2 to 3 years now, and part of me thinks that this is something that just may not ever go away. You think a full offseason, Duggar's going to come back and he's going to be back to his true form, but we've been saying that for the last couple of years now, and he just looks slower and slower out there. I don't know, with some of the other young guys competing there, you got Jabril Peppers at the strong safety spot. I think he played just a little bit today. I'm not sure there's a spot for Kyle Duggar here. Now, you're going to have a big cap hit if you cut him, so ideally you trade him, or maybe you keep him just for that reason. But, yeah, I'm not super impressed with Duggar and was not today. Some special teams highlights. TreVeyon Henderson, like I said, kickoff return for a touchdown. Gibson had the 65-yard one, I believe, in the second quarter. Javon Baker, 2 big special teams tackles. Certainly making a case for himself, even if he didn't do much on offense today. The kicker competition, still very interesting. So, Andy Borregales goes out there, kicks a couple of PATs, gets like a chip shot, 34-yard field goal, and you go, okay, he has the first 3 kicks. He's probably going to be the guy that wins the job. And then Parker Romo comes in there, hits a 57-yarder, and you're like, okay, maybe it really is a competition. Then Parker Romo nearly misses a PAT after that. Had a good PAT make shortly after. But I think Borregales has a slight edge. I'm impressed with Romo's foot, always have been, but this is Parker Romo, guys. This is Parker Romo. He can hit a 60-yarder, no problem, and then he's going to miss a chip shot. I just don't think he's consistent. If Borregales stays consistent, he wasn't consistent early on in camp, but essentially hasn't missed a kick since, the first week of camp, then yeah, you got to give him the job. But Romo hitting that 57-yarder does not help at all, and I think this is going to be a late cut who ends up being the final kicker. Some other notes. Vrabel threw 2 challenge flags, which is a little bit odd in a preseason game. Lost the first one, which he should have won. The second one, the player dropped the ball right in front of him, so he threw the flag. I think he made a joke before the game how ridiculous it is to throw challenge flags in preseason games, and then he proceeded to throw 2. So, yeah, that was a little strange. We also saw for the first time the virtual review from the ball spotter, which I don't love because it took like 5 minutes for them to figure it out, whereas you could just run out the chain gang in 30 seconds and have them do a quick measurement. So they got to button that up a little bit. Not to mention, the ref still has to spot the ball. Like, until you have sensors in the points of the ball that are going to tell you exactly where it ended up when the ref blew the whistle, it doesn't make a lot of sense because the ref spots the ball and half the time it's just completely arbitrary. So the virtual review, I was not impressed. Now, remember when baseball first introduced like instant replay review and it took a little bit of time and everyone was all upset and bitched and moaned about it? Eventually, everyone liked it and it's a lot faster now. Hopefully that's what will happen. Hopefully it'll be like tennis, like the ball hit the line, didn't hit the line. but not very impressed with the virtual review so far. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Tom Brady ceremony unveiling a 12-foot bronze statue, which is 17 feet high when you count the base because they won 17 AFC titles and yada yada. It was nice. It was nice. We've had so many of these ceremonies. You know, you had the first one in week 1 a couple of years ago. Brady had a speech at halftime, and then last year was the Patriots Ring of Honor, whatever you call it, the red jacket ceremony to celebrate him. Belichick came, and then this year you had the statue unveiling. So I'm just assuming next year we'll have the TB12 water fountain dedication somewhere near the old Toby Keith bar at Patriot Place, so looking forward to that. I wasn't expecting Brady to try to perform a bit. Some of the jokes were hit or miss, but he really is trying to be more outgoing and himself, although he doesn't seem like himself when he's trying to perform those jokes. So it was an interesting speech that he decided to give. Took shots at Jets fans, took a subtle shot at Belichick, but overall, always great to see Tom Brady. I like the statue. It's hard to get these faces right. We've seen the Dwayne Wade one. We've seen the Cristiano Ronaldo one. Is it perfect? No, but that's about as good as you're going to get a bronze statue face. And, you know, they nailed the rest of the body. Looks great. They even have the arm sleeves and the knee brace and the QB wristband. Like, great attention to detail. I'm excited to see it whenever I can get back to Gillette. But overall, just a really impressive performance. The final score of a preseason game doesn't really mean all that much, but, you know, they won 48-18, but I'm more impressed that they were up 27-3 at halftime with the guys that are actually going to get playing time out there. Even going against Commanders players that, you know, a good chunk of them will get playing time. You know, there were some starters out there, of course. But Patriots won the joint practice 2 days ago. They sure as hell won the preseason game today. I'd say that the players that were up for me, TreVeyon Henderson, Efton Chisholm, I thought Will Campbell looked really good out there. DJ James continues to impress, had a nice interception. He's on the roster bubble, obviously, but made a case for himself. Players that I think are down, Drake Maye, got to put him in there because of the fumble, turning over the football. Again, some of that had to do with miscommunication from Jared Wilson and Cole Strange, but you even heard Mike Vrabel at halftime say that was not a good decision by the quarterback. Sending a little message to Drake Maye there. So, you know, he's down, but, you know, it's early preseason game. Not too worried about it. Kyle Duggar is down. Kyle Williams, I put him as a down. Jalen Polk continues to not really do anything out there, so he's down. But overall, the Patriots took advantage of bad football, which Mike Vrabel always preaches. They only had a little bit of bad football themselves. You know, one turnover in the first quarter, couple penalties there at the very end of the second half. You know, there were some penalties in the second half, but they looked explosive. They looked disciplined. A far cry from last year's preseason struggles. Henderson stole the show. Chisholm stole the show in the second half. Campbell looks great at left tackle. I'm really not that worried about him. Doesn't mean he's not going to struggle at times, but he looks like a early first-round pick at left tackle, which is what you want. You had the Brady ceremony, but the interesting thing about the Brady ceremony, before I wrap up here, I don't know if you noticed if you were watching the game, Brady came on like in the second quarter and had Brian Hoyer interview him over the PA at Gillette. And the crowd just didn't seem interested. They just did not seem interested at all. And part of the reason I thought this game was going to have a packed house, which it did, I don't know if it was a sellout or not, but it looked pretty close. I thought it was going to be because of the Tom Brady ceremony. I think they're there to watch Mike Vrabel and Drake Maye, TreVeyon Henderson, and this new culture, this new team that finally is bringing hope to this organization after 5 pretty brutal seasons of struggle, you know, after 20 years of dominance. They just didn't care that Tom Brady. They wanted to watch the game, and Mike Vrabel shows up on the Jumbotron the first time, massive ovation. This team is bought in. The fans are bought in. Hopefully, this isn't, I hope they're not peaking too early, right? I hope they're not peaking too early, but Patriots will be back to practice on Sunday. We'll see if that's a real practice or one of Mike Vrabel's famous walkthroughs, but overall 48-18 performance. Patriots absolutely dominated, which is really significant considering the receivers and the quarterbacks didn't do very much. Running backs are excellent. The run blocking is excellent. The O-line pass blocking is solid. The defense is deep. It's aggressive. And they didn't even have 4 of their best players out there. So, not going to get too excited about a preseason game, but anytime you win a game by 30 points, whether it's a preseason or you're up 27-3 at halftime, that says something about your team. And, there's going to be some things they'll need to patch up for sure, but very excited about where this season goes. The Patriots will be at Minnesota next week for joint practices once again. And then, of course, preseason game early on Saturday, which is a weird time to have a preseason game. But we'll be here at PatsCast to cover it. You're not going to want to miss it. If you like this video and you're watching on YouTube, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Again, the Patriots win 48-18. I'm Brad Whitaker. I'll see you soon.
It's the